Welcome to these Travel Times talks here at the Adventure Overland Show 2017. These are brought to you in partnership with Rimmer Brothers, who have a vast array of aftermarket OEM and genuine parts for all Land Rover vehicles at competitive prices. More importantly to you guys, they will deliver them all around the world fast. So if you've any problems, these are the places to come to. There's now a brand new accessories catalogue out with a comprehensive range of Land Rover vehicles, from Range Rover Classics up to, well, vehicles of today. There's also the popular parts catalogue, and this is a great accessory to put in your glove box. For more details, do visit the website at rimmerbrothers.co.uk. Enjoy the talk.
Hello, thank you for joining us this midday. Really nice to see you, and it's been so nice to see many faces we've been chatting to over the last few days over in the campsite. So thank you for coming. We're known as Overlanding Family. That was our website address. We've just returned, as in 4 weeks ago, from a 4-year round-the-world trip. We travelled to 58 countries. We did over 111,000 miles, and we managed to make it to all 7 continents. So there's 4 of us, obviously, Overlanding Family. There's Steve, myself, and my 2 girls down here, Alisha and Lucy, are doing Lego at the front, and they'll pop in at some point to add to the thing. So if anyone who's smaller fancies a little bit of Lego when the adult talk gets a bit boring, they're welcome to join a little bit of Lego making at the front. So there's 4 of us, but we couldn't have a talk about driving around the world without mentioning the 5th member of the family, Truckee. He's out there in the camping in the Overland Sphere section. He is our 5th member of the family, and he was the same vehicle we took all the way around the world. Yesterday we gave a talk, and we talked about the first half of our trip, North America and South America. Today we're going to cover the other continents and a little bit more about life on the road, a little bit about learning on the road, frustrations, our big love, the Himalayas, from the stands all the way back to England, and what lessons we learned. So the first continent we went to, what we're going to do today is Africa. This is our love. I met Steve 22 years ago, something like that, driving across Africa on a Dragoman trip, and we loved it. So we have always tried to return to Africa as many times as possible, you know, in a Land Rover, and do short trips. And actually, Africa wasn't on this trip plan. We were trying to ship from South America to Australia, and they told us that the only way to do it on a ro-ro boat was for it to stop in Durban. So we went, oh, that could be a nice side trip. So we actually picked the truck up in Durban, did a loop round southern Africa, not as far as we would love to have done. We would love to have done a Trans-Africa, but we knew our time was reasonably short. And we went a loop round Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, South Africa, and Lesotho. Now, we love the environment and nature, and so obviously Africa, we're talking about animals. Lucy's going to tell us a little bit about animals.
This picture is when we were just driving along, and we just stopped and we saw loads of cheetahs. The difference between leopards and cheetahs is they've got these black lines, and cheetahs are a lot smaller. Obviously everyone knows that cheetahs are faster. This leopard is climbing down a tree, as you've probably seen. Leopards are one of the couple of, they climb trees, as you can see.
Where did we see it hunting?
We once saw, as it was hunting, I think, was it?
Yeah. All right. Would you want to tell them about this?
Okay.
What's that? You like that?
When once in a while, once maybe every day, month, weeks, I don't know, we would get up really early in the morning, 6, maybe 5, sometimes even 4, and we would take our duvets and our cushions and just pile into the cab, where we would we had to drive to school, drive to lots of through lots of savannas looking for animals in our duvets and also in our nighties. And
So what they did is we were going game driving in the morning, getting the kids up was a bit of a challenge. So the compromise in the end is they just fell out of bed and rolled into the cab in their duvets and then spent the beginning of the day like that. And then you came across, what are these we came across, Lucy?
we were just driving past when we on this dusty road when we saw this 2 lions trying to mate. You see, they kept making this loud noise. The female did, and the male kept going like this on their heads. I have no idea why. I mean, like sitting there for like 2 hours or something, and we had to do I had our lunch there because they wouldn't move out the way, and we had a queue of long cars behind us trying to wondering why, and eventually going around and saying there's a lion mating. We saw lots of elephants, not so many, and there was you can see this one's having a mud bath. It's lots of dust going into the air and everything else. No.
One of our favourite places that we camped in Africa was Hwangi National Park, where you could hire a hide for the night for just a couple more dollars than the actual normal campsite, and that was yours for the night. And usually you have to book it months in advance, but we were a little bit disorganized, or obviously we didn't know when we were going to be there. But we heard that this particular hide wasn't booked, and therefore we slept there for the night, and this was fantastic. You're supposed to actually sleep on the hide, but you see the very wide, shallow staircase there. We went up and went, I'm not sure we feel very comfortable sleeping up here. Cats can climb stairs. So we actually slept in the truck. And Steve and I thought we'd sleep on the roof, and we thought that'd be great. We just see the waterhole is just behind us, as you saw, and that we would spend the night, looking at the stars, the kids inside, very sort of romantic on the roof, watching any animals come down. So I was cooking tea, spaghetti bolognese, big family favourite. Big male bull elephant came down. He could obviously smell the spaghetti bolognese, turns around from the waterhole, lifts his trunk up, comes sniffing around, and we realised, although we're in a massive truck, it's not very big compared with a big male bull elephant. And he was sniffing up. We had both hatches open, and he was sort of putting his trunk almost down into the hatch, sniffing the spaghetti bolognese. So at this point, we decided we'd sleep inside. But it was a fantastic experience. We spent the evening sitting on the roof, watching as 300 elephants came silently running down. And it was very peculiar because it was a full moon, and you just saw sort of a little sort of movement in the corner of your eye, and you turn around and there's 30 elephants in a herd running down without a noise. It was amazing. And so we sort of spent the night watching them, eventually went to bed, and then we woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning with a pride of lions around us. No more elephants. And the 3 males sort of positioned themselves about 50 meters each off the corner of the trucks and roared all night. It was the most magical night. Of course, not much sleep, but it was an amazing experience. And that's one of the great things about having your own vehicle, is you can do things like that. And it was the best night. But of course, Africa's not all about animals. We had some great times. Here we are in Great Zimbabwe and having a great time. The history was fascinating. These are San Bushmen. We went to visit a community there. They had a community centre, and that's partly how they were sort of funding their village and their lifestyle. So this was fascinating. And of course, in Africa, we love the landscapes, all that wide open spaces. This is Botswana. We really enjoyed it.
Yes, from Africa, our next place we want to travel to is Australia. Now, there may be some Australians in the room. One of the big challenges with Australia, if you've ever flown into Australia, they often ask you, do you have any boots with you? Have you been on a farm? They're really, really serious about the quarantine. And it comes exactly the same to when you take a vehicle in. So the big thing was your vehicle has to be as clean as a brand new vehicle. Now, you can imagine we just spent 18 months in North and South America. We spent 5 months driving around the game parks of Southern Africa. The vehicle was not what you would call in showroom condition. And we were told if we didn't get it completely clean, they would reject it, and all that cost of shipping would be out of the window. So we spent 8 days cleaning the vehicle. First, we spent 4 days cleaning the inside of the vehicle, and that means using cleaning equipment like toothbrushes and cotton buds to get all the last little flies out of mosquito nets and things. And then I took it to a garage to get the outside clean for 4 days. It's where we could use a power wash, and we could get into a pit where you could clean from the underside. The guys there were great. First, I was told I wasn't allowed to do any cleaning. They had staff to do that. Secondly, after 2 hours, they came back proudly and said, "Oh, we've finished." And me and the guy, the service manager, looked at them and said, "No, you haven't even started yet." And little did they know we'd spent 4 days power washing the vehicle. And it really did look, in the end, in showroom condition. Unfortunately, we had to do all the engine bay, take the wheels off, change the air filter. And as I said, that's it loaded on the ship. The shipping company actually let me look around the ship. They took me on to show me what it was like. A ro-ro ship is actually not that interesting. It looks very much like the inside of a multi-story car park. But that was the truck loaded up with fingers crossed that we would get into Australia. And the good news was, yes, we passed. Actually, a 45-minute inspection, and we passed. We had another slight scare. The dimensions in the EU, the maximum width of your vehicle is 2 meters 55. In Australia, it's 2 meters 50. Just before shipping, I measured my vehicle, 2 meters 52. When we went to have it, you have to go through like a vehicle certification when you go into Australia. Everyone said, don't worry, they'll never measure it. I was given a sheet, fill in things. Some of the things was dimensions, so I just filled in 2 meters 50. And the guy did a quick check of headlights, had a quick look underneath, said, fine, mechanic. He said, we just have to measure it. My heart just sunk. We measured the length, and then he goes to measure the width. Now, he was on his own. He couldn't measure the width by himself, and we measured the back of the vehicle, which is up here. So he asked me to hold the tape measure. We were 2 meters 50. And I'm really pleased it was. Australia, I will say, it's a stunning country. And it's fantastic for overlanding. It's very, very familiar for us being English. There's lots of things that are similar. After being in South America and stuff, we started finding, familiar foods. Marmite, not Vegemite, I would haste to add, but Marmite, custard powder, these sort of things. But of course, Australia's got the great outdoors. They've got some wonderful cities and some lovely towns, but for us, Australia really was about the outdoors. And we spent 9 months in Australia. And as you can see, we pretty much did a loop of Australia. We started near Perth in Fremantle, headed south, went across to Tasmania, and then round the coast with some trips inland to see Ayers Rock and some of the beautiful sights there. But amazing sights, stunning beaches. There's many countries will claim they've got the best beaches in the world. I'd say Western Australia probably gives any country a run for its money in the most amazing beaches. And the great thing, the beach is yours. Once you get out away from Perth, there's no one else on the beach. You might not swim in them. The water's a bit cold and you're not quite sure what's in that water. But the beach themselves, absolutely pristine. The outback, yes, it is. Live out your Crocodile Dundee fantasies. You're just away from it all in all the red dust. We drove across a dusty highway from Queensland to Alice Springs. I think we must have driven 2,500 kilometres. We spent a week, and I think we passed 10 vehicles. We stayed one night on a farm. I call it a farm. I think it took us 4 hours to drive out of the farm because they're just so big, these cattle estates. It really was wonderful, and just the most amazing stars and what have you. We also took the truck to Fraser Island. Some people said we were a bit stupid because it's a sand island. And yes, driving your truck in the sea is not the best thing to be doing for corrosion. But we spent a week on Fraser Island where we drove in the sand dunes. You had to drive when the tide went out. And then when the tide came in, you had to find a way to get into the dunes and camp up in the dunes. And that was amazing. They have the most amazing wild dingoes there. You need to look after the children because they're not like your average friendly dog. But that's amazing. And of course, Australia is surrounded by some amazing ocean. The Barrier Reef needs no real introduction. I'll court controversy, and I think the Ningaloo Reef is a lot better in Western Australia. We even went out and swimming with whale sharks, and in that picture, the little person in the middle is Lucy with an 8-meter whale shark behind her, and that's a great experience. Teaching the children, life on the road is a great opportunity to teach children. In the outback, you're laying back and you've just got this wonderful thing of stars and the most amazing Milky Way you'll ever see. Of course, neither Gilly or I are astronomers, so it also courted our curiosity. We had to learn what it was we were seeing, what were the constellations. So together with the children, we learned about the constellations. The great thing these days is there's an app you can buy and point it at the stars, and it tells you what you're looking at. But yes, we spent some amazing nights with children trying to spot the constellations, and actually the kids are now better off at spotting the stars than we are. But Australia, difficult to get into in the sense of certainly that cleaning of the vehicle, and there is a lot of horror stories out there. Everyone will tell you the horror story. After a while, you work out it's the same horror story that's being told 6 different ways, and it's just one instance, not like every instance. So get out there and do it, Australia. There's a lot of people, a lot of Australians are traveling around their own country, a lot of retired Australians are called the grey nomads. So even when you're in really remote places, it might be really remote, but there's always somebody around within a few hours traveling through. A wonderful continent to see.
Of course, travelling for 4 years, it's not like a holiday. There is the usual life on the road things that you have to get on with. There was always vehicle maintenance, checking, and we've got a brand new truck, but it did need sort of a regular checking. There's a disc brake cover on the sand there in Australia. That was our regular fail. Every 10,000 kilometres, one of them would fall off, and we got used to the distinctive rattle and say, oh, it's gone again. But thankfully, it was just a quick weld to put it back together. So as well as the maintenance, there was always the shopping and the cooking, and we kept up with the blog as well, which we kept up to date because it was so easy to let it slide, and then it was a big job to do afterwards. Very quickly, when we got the truck and we shipped to Canada, it was incredibly quickly that the girls started saying, when we were out and about and they were a bit bored, I want to go home. And we, concerned parents worried how we're settling in. So where do you mean by home? Thinking, was it where we lived before in the Czech Republic? Was it England with Granny? Or no, what they actually meant was Truckee. That was their home, and that made a huge difference for them, their comfort levels. As long as we were around, or one of us was around, and the truck was around, they were incredibly relaxed about where we were. It didn't upset them. And in fact, sometimes when we had to stay in a hotel or a hostel, maybe when we were shipping, or there wasn't any other, we wanted to go somewhere, they say, oh, we want to go back to the truck. It was home, and so it's great that they found that comfort, and of course we did. Now one of the things we love about the truck most of all is because of its capabilities that we can fuel up, get water, get food, and we can go for 10 days without returning to civilization. And we love to get away from it all. This is in Kyrgyzstan, and this is just beautiful. This is an example of the sort of places we like to go and really, really get away from it, and especially crossing the outback, crossing the deserts, up in the mountains. 10 days gives you a really good chance to get away. Now, one of the best things of being together as a family, travelling as a family, is being together all the time. Lots of nice moments like this one, laughing, etc. Lovely. But you can imagine in a small space, like every family, we have our issues. And so when people ask, what's the best thing about the trip we did? Being together as a family is definitely one of the best things. And then they ask, what's the worst things? And we would say, being together as a family all the time. It's quite difficult sometimes to get a bit of space. But the great thing about overlanding compared with being on a yacht or something, if you need a bit of space, open the door, out you go, and to the kids, as long as they're in sight, that's fine. We can all get space from each other. And we even do that when we're driving, is the kids listen to headphones and listen to stories, audiobooks while we drive. So they don't have to listen to us, we don't have to listen to their stories, and everyone gets a bit of space mentally from that. We love to hike. We, all the way down through North America, Central America, we did lots of shorter hikes, hoping when we got to the Andes that they would be well sort of strong enough to do lots of walking. And what we found is they were absolutely brilliant. In the bottom of South America, in Tolos del Paine, we did 3 days of walks, 64 kilometres altogether, and they were amazing. Fuel is talking. They'll tell each other stories, I'll tell them stories, they'll tell me stories, etc., etc. And the odd bit of, and Alicia's queen at telling stories, and a little bit of chocolate helps too. And then when we went to the Himalayas, we did an 11-day hike and did 150 kilometres, and then we did another hike where we went up high, and they've hiked up as high as 4,800 metres once they're acclimatised, and they're brilliant. But we find, that getting used to walking was really good for them. And of course, one of the other fantastic things about this lifestyle is things like cooking over the campfire, relaxing, looking at the stars, life's simple pleasures. That's really very special for us. Thank you. So after Australia, we returned to Perth and we shipped to Asia. Asia has quite a few challenges, which Steve will come on to a bit later. But as you can see, our route, we started in Singapore. Interesting, because camper vans are illegal in Singapore. So we shipped into Singapore. Then we had to arrange a tow truck to pull the truck to the border. A whole distance of 15 kilometres. It was painful, because what we didn't realise at the time is the border is a dual carriageway. So there is nowhere to stop and you sort of unclip your truck and drive on. And we're also automatic. So there was quite a lot of axle, they had to sort everything out for that. So, but we eventually got it out, and then the police waved, we did it on the hard shoulder of the dual carriageway, and the police waved us over at the border point saying, "What are you doing here? You're illegal." And we was like, "We've driven 100 metres from here," and they're like, "Not sure you're even allowed to do that." But there was nowhere what else to do. So anyway, it was fine in the end. Then we went to Malaysia, Thailand, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, back to Thailand, Myanmar, India, Nepal, and then Pakistan, China and Tibet, and then we went to the stands and wiggled our way back to Europe that way. Now, one thing we loved in Australia was the wide open spaces and the lack of people. Asia, so many people. But we did love it because the people were wonderful. Everywhere we went, especially travelling with Lucy being blonde and very cute, it was like travelling with a superstar sometimes. She'd step out and people were like, "Oh, baby," and call you, photos, selfies. She was brilliant. She smiled and was really, really good with them. And occasionally she'd be like, "Mummy, I've had enough." And okay, that's fine. And I'd pose for the photos, which they're very disappointed with. But she was great. But they did love children, and they were so wonderful wherever we went. There was no problem with the children, etc. And of course, one of the great things about Asia, driving reasonably quickly compared with Australia where we were 8 months, you're constantly changing countries and cultures, and it's so different. Here we are in Myanmar, and there's a truck behind. And one morning in Laos, we were just going for a walk very early in the morning, and we'd heard sort of the bells going in a nearby temple all night. And we popped our head round and found that there was a huge festival just round the corner from us. And we stood at the back, and one of the monks said, "Oh, I'm so pleased you're here. Let me explain to you what's going on." And there was no other foreigners. It was just accidentally walking into it, and they were so welcoming and so friendly. It was really nice. Of course, Asia's got amazing temples, and that's really, really amazing thing to see all the different parts. And you can't talk about Asia without mentioning the amazing food. We often cook ourselves in the truck, but when we're out and about, we always eat local food because it's, one of the huge benefits. And we'd been looking forward to Indian food from, as soon as we left Thailand, we were like, India's next after Myanmar. Let's enjoy some Indian food. So that was fantastic. And even with so many people, we did manage to have some amazing animal experiences. Here we are in India, in Pench National Park, where we got charged by a tiger. And what we didn't realise, the reason she was charging us is not that we were in the way, but she had a huge male following her, not in the bushes behind. And so she was just like, this is enough. She was trying to get away from him, and we reversed back, and then she went across, and then we saw him crossing. So that's why we were sort of, oh, what's the issue? Why is she upset? But it was not us. It was this very persistent male right behind. Now, as well as me teaching the girls every day, we try and do it with getting experts in who can teach them far better skills than I can.
This photo is me learning batik from a gentleman in Malaysia. We were walking along and we heard this particular village was particularly famous for its lovely batik work. So we had a look and we found this batik workshop. He did courses for about 2 hours. Was it 2 hours? And then from that on, we just did that. The next day, it was tipping it down with rain. So what else could we do? So we had booked it, and we went and did this for 2 hours. Daddy didn't come. He finds it boring.
Okay.
But this is also, so that was really good. This is actually us cooking in Thailand. We made a variety of dishes. You could make, what we thought was you'd make about 6 dishes, and then you would all just eat the whole thing in a big feast, which would have probably made you all a bit sick, but luckily it was in several stages, so you'd make something, then eat it. But that was all really good, except Daddy insisted on putting too much chili in his food. This is us sewing in Nepal. This is when Daddy went to London to get his Pakistani visa, and we were completely bored because we couldn't go anywhere because we can't drive. So we did this special course. It's run by ladies. It's what's it called? Women Cooperative in Nepal. It's special skills, and they do special courses. So this is us making an iPad case. They have these really old sewing machines, the ones you see in museums, that sort of thing. Except they're not new then, they're old. So you have to literally rock your foot, and it actually starts really hurting after about 10 minutes. So the lady had to have I had to have my foot on, and then the lady had to put her foot on to help me keep it going. And now Daddy's going to start talking about frustration. And you're not allowed to boast so much about your Thailand visa that we all fall asleep.
Okay. They did other things. I mean, they learned how to paint from Aboriginals in Australia. They made bows and arrows with the Sand people in Namibia. And it's a great education, not just having Gilly, who is providing wonderful training for them, but that's some wonderful education that side. I think, looking back, we were talking to some people this morning who were just about to go to South America, and we were like, oh, we really want to go back. But then if we've been talking to someone who's just about to go back to Asia, we'd be like, oh, we really want to go back. And all of them have their own things. And I think Asia in some ways is the most diverse continent in terms of the breadth of different things it has to offer. But that does come at a little bit of a price. It's also, in some ways, the most frustrating continent. It certainly needs the most paperwork. As Brits, we need many more visas for Asia. And some of those visas are not particularly easy. The Indian visa can be a real pain. The Chinese visa can be a real pain. The Pakistani visa, well, you can get a Pakistani visa. You can get it in London. And that is it. The problem was we were coming from Singapore, and literally the only way I could get it was to fly back to England and put in my passport and get a visa. Also, there's a number of countries where you need to be on a guided trip. You actually have to have a guide with you to escort your vehicle through the country. That's the case in China. In Myanmar, they're not actually in your vehicle, but they drive ahead of you and you follow them. And now Thailand has quite restrictive rules. We were very lucky with Thailand. They brought in these rules that said no foreign vehicles over 3.5 tons, no camper vans, and everyone else need a permit. We were in Malaysia at the time, and Thailand, you sort of can't get round. You need to go through it. So after a lot of backwards and forwards with the authorities, we eventually were given a special exemption, at which point I said, could I have 2? Because we actually want to go to Laos and Cambodia as well and then come back into town. And we were given one. I think a couple of vehicles after us were given them, but they're very restrictive at the moment. And on top of now needing a permit, they're also saying you're needing a guide. It's quite illogical why they've got this, but it does mean people are having to look for routes around Thailand, which generally involve shipping. So lots of things there. Borders closed, borders open. Our route back is a bit sort of convoluted. We went through Myanmar and we went into India. That was a little bit of an issue in itself because the first town we arrived at in India had a curfew. There'd been some militants had killed some police on the road a couple of days before, and the whole district was under curfew. And so we ended up having to hole up in a hotel for the night and just get off the road. And then the next day we just drove straight out of there. But our plan was, how do we get out of India and Nepal? We'd wanted to go across the Himalayas from Nepal to Tibet, but in 2015 there was the earthquake there. That border was closed. It has literally just opened in the last couple of weeks, which is great news for anyone else. We couldn't go that way. So we worked with our Burmese agent that we would go back through Myanmar and into China. Unfortunately, there was an uprising in Myanmar, not the one that everyone reads about in the press about the Rohingyas. There's actually another one. And it meant the border with China was closed. And so it was, how do we get out of Nepal and India? And really the only way was Pakistan. So after a lot of hard deliberation, it was decided I would be the one that would drive the truck through Pakistan while Gilly and the girls flew to join me in China. But lots of those sort of frustrations which you need to be flexible and plan around. And I suppose everyone says, you know, security issues. As I say, Pakistan, to me, the people were unbelievably friendly. In the sort of south of the country, it felt a little bit edgy, but as soon as you got into the mountains, it was just unbelievable. I did have people with Kalashnikovs in my cab with me. They were the security forces. There was a 300-kilometer stretch of road where they insisted you were had a military escort, effectively, or someone from the security forces. But they were the most amazing people. I stopped at the first one. They said, "Sorry, you're going to have a security escort. Our governor says you are guests in our country, and therefore we have to do everything we can to make sure your experience is as safe and as pleasant as possible. But we haven't had our breakfast yet, so please would you get out of your cab and come and join us in the police post for paratha and tea and breakfast, and please tell us something about English football." So I had a very nice breakfast with them. They jump in 20 kilometers along the road, they swap over. It was a lovely day with these guys, chatting away to them. And then eventually they said, you don't need a security escort anymore. You can get off into the mountains. So really, really, really good. China's very specific because you need to do a guided tour. It's very expensive. We really wanted to see Tibet. But now we were in sort of the wrong side of the country. We had to do this very long loop through China. We were concerned about some of the political things we know about the Chinese oppression in Tibet. I've travelled in the eastern part of China before and never really noticed China being particularly different. But the two western provinces, we were in Xinjiang province, which is a predominantly Muslim province, and Tibet. The oppression was really quite shocking. Again, we don't hear about this in the press. In Kashgar, I said, you know, it felt like living in an occupied state. You were searched every 200 meters down the street. If you went under an underpass, under a road, you had to put your bag in like an airport scanner. You talk about frustrations. I eventually lost it and used to just refuse. And this, you know, everywhere we went, we were being checked in security. You know, we kept saying, we're tourists, not terrorists. You know, but it was some frustration. But on the plus side, Tibet was amazing, as I think Gilly will touch on. Last frustration, and everyone will do this. If anyone's been to the map room and heard Kevin talk about India, he said, don't go. No, I wouldn't go that far. India's got wonderful things to see, but the driving is shocking. This is a level crossing. They were doing a few train maneuvers, so we ended up having to spend 30 minutes waiting to get across. The first few minutes, everyone lines up like they would in England behind each other. 4 or 5 cars, 6, 7 cars. After 7 cars, people decide, no, we're not going to be the 8th car. So instead, what we will do is we will line up on the opposite side of the road where the oncoming traffic would be, and they line up as deep there. So when you're waiting for it to come, it's now just solid on your side of the road. Of course, guess what they've been doing on the other side of the level crossing? They've done exactly the same. So now you've got a solid block of traffic filling both sides of the road. The barriers go up, everyone moves forward, and then it's just dog eat dog. Now, usually I work on the principle the biggest gets right of way, and we're pretty big. But the problem here, as you can see, you've got motorbikes underneath your wheels. We had a camel, we had horses. It took about 40 more minutes just to get across the level crossing, and the driving it really scared us. Unfortunately, the children did learn a few choice phrases that they probably shouldn't have been learning, because mummy and daddy's language did get a bit colourful at times, should we say.
Under exaggeration.
Under exaggeration, she said, yes. Gilly, Himalayas.
But the one thing we did love about India, amongst many, but we love mountains. So the Himalayas just blew us away. We've already travelled there, but we knew this was going to be one of our true highlights. Obviously, in such a big truck, little tiny mountain roads, not so much fun, but once we got up into the mountains, it was fantastic. And the best thing is to get out on foot. So we did 2 long treks in Nepal. We started going to Annapurna Base Camp and found out half an hour after the start of our trek that actually there was avalanches and the whole thing was closed off. So we thought, well, we've got our backpacks on, we're ready to go. And so we kind of made up our own routes, skipping between routes, and ended up going up to higher up than we thought we were going, and just sort of made it up as we went, and we just had a fantastic time. And of course Nepal is easy for trekking because you can do tea house trekking. So the problem with trekking with children is, of course, you've got to carry your own stuff, and it's just when it's just your own stuff, that's fine. But if you're carrying 2 people's stuff, sleeping bags, etc., etc., it gets very heavy. So tea house trekking meant we didn't have to carry as much, tents and everything. So we got some great snow and beautiful routes, and we love it. Once we'd finished in Nepal, we went to Tibet, as Steve said, and Steve's dream has always been to drive to Mount Everest. That's been a long-term love. And whatever you might say about the Chinese in Tibet, and I can talk about that for a long time and their issues, they do make a lovely smooth tar road in the most ridiculous places. So all the way to Everest Base Camp in Tibet, it's smooth tar. It might go like this, but it's a beautiful road. So what we did is we drove the truck up to 5,200 meters. We camped the night. There's our camping spot. That's Mount Everest out the back, right next to a monastery and a little guest house, and of course an army post. And then we drove a little bit further on, and we walked to overlook the actual real base camp where the climbers are, and it was just fantastic. It was a beautiful day, the most amazing view, very windswept. Obviously the wind and the prayer flags are going quite mad, but it was just an amazing highlight. And the weird thing was, when we just came back to the truck and we were just driving back to our camp spot, we got a little knock on the door. And these 2 very, very thin, gaunt-looking Westerners said, "Are you going back to the monastery?" And we're like, yeah. And said, "Can we have a lift?" And we're like, "Okay, sure, jump in." And they were just wearing Crocs. And we thought, who comes to Mount Everest in Crocs? So anyway, got them in a cab, chatting as we went back. And so we're saying, so are you, where are you staying? Are you staying near the monastery in the guest house? They said, no, we're at base camp. So we're sort of chatting, and it came up and said, "Oh, are you going to Summit?" And he went, he was very shy, and he said, "Yeah, I did it 2 nights ago." Like, what? Okay, so we need to find out more. So we were pumping him. He was asking us about our trip, and we chatted on. It turned out we had picked up Kilian Jornet, who is an extreme mountain runner. He ran to the top of Mount Everest, essentially. Because
broken the world record.
He'd just broken the world record, and what he was doing, he was going down to the guest house for some chips. He'd obviously climbed Everest once, and obviously the thing that was most in his heart, he said, "I'm just dying for some chips." He said, "I'm in a tent, I've got a little stove, I can't make chips, but at the guest house, don't serve much, but they do serve chips." So that's what he was doing. He was going down, and so it was this amazing experience, and we sort of say, what's your plans, later on in the week? And he said, because I was asking initially, what was the view like from the top of Everest? And he said, "I don't know, I got up there at midnight." So he said, "Well, I might go to the top and see if the view's any good." So later in the week, literally 2 days after we picked him up, he did it again. He's just amazing. So so it was really nice. We got a nice picture with him, and he was fascinated with our trip and came and looked around the truck, and the kids gave him the tour and everything. So we love that. He, as Alisha says, he was far more interested in our trip than what he was doing, and we were desperate to find out what he was doing. So it was really interesting talking to them quite a long time. And the other thing I'd always dreamed of going to Tibet was the culture. And we were amazed that after 60 years of Chinese occupation, that the Tibetan people, inner faith, in Buddhist faith, and their culture is so strong. And it was lovely. This is the Barkor circuit in Lhasa. And every morning and every evening, hordes of people come and pray as they do this holy circuit round. And they are very welcoming. If you wish to join them and respectfully go the correct way around, they are delighted, and they love children. They absolutely loved having their children there. And this is Lucy, surrounded by Tibetan grannies, all doing a bit of Lucy loving, sort of touching her hair and saying, oh, she's so cute, and smiling. And yeah, it was a really special experience. And it was amazing how strong their culture really, really was, even in the face of all the suppression. So it was really, really nice. Now, the one thing we've been really concerned about going to Tibet was altitude. Obviously, you take responsibility for yourself as adults, but the thought of taking children puts a lot more sort of, you really, really want to be concerned about it, etc. And so we knew from the Andes that they were pretty good with altitude. I don't know if you can see the GPS reading on there, but it's 5,264 meters. That's how high we got. We got a lot of advice from mountain guides in the Andes about how you could tell if children were having altitude symptoms. And everyone is, of course, individual, and it depends, obviously, on the trip. Sometimes you can have no altitude sickness of one trip and then really suffer the next time. But the mountain guide said, with children, the best way to tell, if they're eating, they're fine. If they're not eating, then you need to get concerned, because they can't always articulate what the problem was. So the other thing we found was in the Andes is one thing with children, don't let them play dens or forts under the duvet at altitude. Lucy in the Andes managed to get under the duvet with her teddies, and she was making up some sort of a magical game, and then she came out and went, I feel awful, and sort of looked very green. Under the duvet, of course, there's a lot less oxygen, and when you're already in low oxygen conditions, it really makes a difference. So, yeah. They had to sort of make sure that they weren't doing silly things like that. But the rest of the time, they were absolutely fine. And they did walk very well at 4,800 meters. They had no problem at all. And it just as we went up gradually, it was absolutely fine. And the one evening that we did have a concern in Tibet is when we drove up onto the plateau, and you think, oh, well, you're driving up, usually you go around mountain roads like this, so you slowly acclimatize as you go up. Well, in Tibet, the road is beautifully straight, and it just goes up. And so we drove up to about 4,500 meters in the day. And being Tibet, you are very, very regimented about where you can sleep. So it's not like we could say, that's enough, we'll stop. We had to keep on going because our guide was sort of stressing and said, well, you need to check in into this town tonight. Otherwise, we'll all be in serious problems. So we, that night, they ate a huge supper. We parked on the side of the road, which we weren't supposed to do, but we were running late, and the guide negotiated that we would check in, but we wouldn't have to sleep in a hotel because we'd be turning up there at sort of 10 o'clock at night, which is something we hate doing, and we never drive in the dark. But this instance, it hadn't quite worked out because of various police checks. So we got up high. We all climbed in the back, including the guide. We had fried egg sandwiches. They wolfed their food down. We thought, that's all right, they're fine. Then we went to bed. 2 o'clock in the morning, Lucy got up and vomited everywhere. And we were like, oh gosh, what do we do? This is awful. The nearest town is miles away. Let's just keep her under. I slept next to her, kept on poking her every 2 minutes, checking she was breathing, etc. We felt terrible because we'd had no sleep and the altitude wasn't fun for us. In the morning, she woke up, oh, morning, Mummy, skipped off, opened the truck, went for a little run around, and we're like, oh my goodness, we're exhausted from the night of worry, but you're absolutely fine. And she was. It wasn't, it was just, but we had to be very careful of it. So from the Himalayas, our next point was the stands.
Yeah, and the stands, they're not actually that far away when you think about it from here. A great place to go. The first thing I had when I left China and crossed into Kyrgyzstan was, I'm free again. I can go where I want. And they are, the big thing was we were back in the wilds. We could camp where we wanted to camp. Big open spaces. Kyrgyzstan is a wonderfully green country. We then went through Tajikistan and did the famous Pamir Highway. The roads were as rough as hell. The scenery was fantastic. And of course, we were wonderfully altitude adjusted. So now when we went across a 4,200 meters pass, we were like, it's just 4,000 meters. Let's not worry until it's 5,000 meters. So amazing scenery in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, friendly people, and just so easy to camp. We hit Uzbekistan, and of course we hit the Silk Road, and that Uzbekistan for us was all about the cities, Samarkand, Bukhara, Khiva, and the amazing Islamic architecture and history that we could see there. We were now having to speed up. We were running out of time. We'd timed it, you know, Alisha had to go back to school. So when did you come back? Well, we thought 10 days was enough time to settle in, to put her back into school, because why would we want to miss anything on the road? So we hit Turkey, and really for us in Turkey, we spent a lot of time Roman ruins, Ephesus, and other Roman ruins. I met up with an old friend who took us to one of his an island that was like a little tourist island, but only Turks went there. And we spent a beautiful few days on an island, obviously Istanbul. And then home for Europe. We had only 2 weeks to get through Europe. As soon as we hit Europe, again, lots of people. It was the peak holiday season. It was August. We thought, oh, this is going to be horrendous. Where can we park? And right at the death in Montenegro, we found this, you can't really see it there, but stunning spot. We drove down a track. We'd seen hotel after hotel, and we drove down this track, and we were just on this cliff edge about 150 meters above the sea, with the sea, you know, 180-degree vista of the sea and the sunset. And we were only going to stay there the evening because we needed to push on. We said, we can't leave this spot just for a few hours, you know. So we spent the next day, walked down, and there was a beautiful little beach and just a couple of families down there. Amazing, amazing finish to the trip.
Now, this is not meant to be a life coaching or philosophical sort of discussion, but, you know, people have asked us, have you changed? What did you learn on the road? And yes, we have changed as people, and we've changed as a family. But some of the things we learn is that around the world, people are lovely, people are friendly. 99.9% of the people in the world are kind and helpful and welcoming to strangers. It's almost only when you get to Northern Europe that people are a bit more, you know, reticent and less keen to, well, sort of say hello and nice to meet you and wow, where are you from, etc. So we weren't, you know, on our experiences, of course there are the odd few bad people out there, but most of it, the world's people are good. And a lot of that comes from our perception, comes, of course, from media. We talked the other day about what your neighbours tell you. The media often portrays your country as being fine, but your neighbours are really badly off. They're not scary. Bad things happen. They're not good people. And wherever we are in the world, they say, oh, welcome to our country. It's wonderful. Don't believe what you read about our country in the way, but you should be really careful going next door. They are awful. And of course, that's not true. You know, everyone is pretty much good. I mean, our one regret that we have about the trip is that we didn't take the children through Pakistan. We had read lots of things. We always look at the FCO advice. We've taken calculated risks, we admit, all the way around the world, but we weren't sure. And part of the issue was because we were going very early in the season, crossing the Karakoram Highway. We were going at a sort of late April, that we couldn't ask someone who'd just done it. We could only get advice from people who did it last October, the previous October. So we didn't have up-to-date sort of knowledge on it. So we decided that Steve would drive by himself and do the Karakoram, which is one of the world's most beautiful roads, and I'd fly over with the children. So that's the one regret we have. And what we found was the world is so beautiful. I mean, we've got thousands of photos. If you look at our blog, there's a lot about how beautiful the world is, but it's sadly, a lot of it's under threat, and the population is really sort of pushing on it. And the last one, you can manage with less. I know it's a little bit hypocritical. We have a huge truck. I'm very aware of that. But, you know, for 4 people, we did manage with so much less than we thought we did. We put lots of extra cupboards in and stuff like that. We don't need all that stuff in some ways. You know, half the cupboards are full of stuff we don't use very often. So I hope one of the lessons we have learned is as we return home, we've only been back a month, is that we can manage with less and we don't need quite so much. So.
Yeah, I think one thing on that was how we spent Christmas with the children. And, you know, we didn't have a lot of space and it was difficult to buy presents. So we'd buy them 2 or 3 little presents, and just seeing how happy they were just with that, and making Christmas decorations out of tin foil and stuff and decorating them in the local trees. You know, it didn't have to be a full-blown thing, and just what happiness you can get from that. Again, this isn't meant to be preaching, but a few things if you're thinking about doing it. If some of you may have been to the map room, and one thing you'll probably find that overlanders are not short of is opinions. And we all have contrasting opinions. And I think the best advice I can give anyone is, you know, there's no such thing as an ideal trip. There's no right trip. There's no wrong trip. There's just your trip. And you got to remember, it's yours. You will get people who tell you with most pride that they've spent 17,427 nights and they've never paid for camping. You know, and their idea of paying for camping is it's the biggest sin you've ever done, and they'll lecture you why you shouldn't do it. You get people who, you know, claim they've never driven on a tar road. They always drive on the roughest road they've ever been, and they're the biggest heroes. You just don't want to get caught. It's your trip. If you're not comfortable driving off-road, don't drive off-road. You know, if that's your thing, great, that's your thing. You know, I think I didn't hear much of the presentation before, but seeing the guys that did it in a £100 car, you know, there's all sorts of ways to do it. And it's about your trip. It's working out what's right for yourself. I mean, it's good talking to people and listening and getting some inspiration and working out some things. But if you're thinking about doing this, you know, just remember it is your trip. You will have to make sacrifices, and probably the biggest decision you'll have to make is the decision to say we're doing it and we're going to go and go away for however long it is, and that's the hardest decision. But the one thing I will say is you will never regret that decision, and you will regret not doing it if it's there. So make the sacrifices, do the planning, and get out there and do it. It's a fantastic thing. It's such a privilege. We are so privileged in England and Europe to be able to do these sort of things, and it's an amazing thing to do. So with that, I'd like to thank you for listening both today and yesterday. We've probably talked a bit longer today, so we've almost run out of time, but we would be delighted to answer any questions you have now, or we will be back at the truck for the rest of the afternoon.
We'll be back shortly at Adventure Overland 2017 with another Travel Times Talks. But for now, do check out any of our other videos. And of course, as always, a big thanks to Rimmer Brothers, who have partnered with us to bring you these talks. Their new popular parts catalogue is available for all Land Rover vehicles and is a great addition to your glove box. For more information, also do check out www.rimmerbrothers.co.uk.